Okay, so next time you call for an Uber or a Lyft in Tennessee, you probably should check your own insurance policy first, because if you do not have uninsured motorist coverage, you could be left with nowhere to turn if there is an accident. So says the sages, C. Mark Warren and John Mark Griffin. They're here to explain. Good to see you.
Ain't it good to be alive and be in Tennessee, Julie?
It's always a good day. Well, it's always a good day to be alive and be in Tennessee.
Absolutely.
However, in Tennessee,
Uber has
you better be
changed their
careful.
policies. You know, Uber and Lyft, both ride-sharing companies, used to cover uninsured motorists.
Right.
They have dropped uninsured motorists, and now it's up to the passenger to have uninsured motorists. So please, you know, check and make sure before you set foot in an Uber or a Lyft, make sure you have uninsured motorists.
Well, there's some states require it. You know, Georgia, for example, requires that these ride shares, you know, provide uninsured motorist coverage, you know, for the passengers. But Tennessee doesn't.
Do you know why? And did this just change this year?
Well, you know, Uber is a for-profit company, right? So is Lyft. And so when they change a policy like this, it is to, you know, keep their profits or make profits. So obviously they've had a run-in or problems with having to pay out on uninsured motorist claims in Tennessee, because 1 in 4 drivers in Tennessee does not have any insurance.
So I think that was a relevant question to ask them, because there's your answer.
Yes.
If it's costing them money, that means it could be costing you money, so be careful.
They're passing the expense to us.
Right. And you know, uninsured motorist coverage is just relatively inexpensive.
It is.
It's not an expensive item if you're purchasing it yourself, or if Lyft or Uber was required to provide that. It's relatively inexpensive compared to other kind of insurance. But we need to think of in terms of protecting the consumer. And this is not what's happening. They're protecting big business by not requiring them to provide uninsured motorists.
Okay.
In Georgia, there is a law where they have to have uninsured motorists up to $1 million. Now, let's be clear. You know, there is liability insurance. If an Uber driver causes an accident that causes a passenger injuries, Uber has insurance to pay for that. And Uber drivers do have accidents. You know, guess the #1 cause of Uber driver accidents?
It's what you would expect.
Distracted driving. You know why? Because they have the little GPS thing right there in front of them, you know, and so when an Uber driver is distracted, they're more likely to cause an accident. Also, fatigue. Why fatigue?
Because they're driving late at night.
Well, that, and usually Uber is a side hustle.
In a side hustle, they're working that as a second job
they have a
or to
full-time
supplement
job.
income, and there's not the regulations as they have on truck drivers.
Well, okay,
So let me just, so an Uber driver causes an accident, runs a stop sign, injuries, you're covered. If that same accident occurred with an uninsured driver, you are the one paying your medical
Yeah,
bills.
but here's the silver lining to me in that equation.
You always see the silver lining, don't you?
You ought to have uninsured coverage.
Hey,
Oh,
anyway.
absolutely.
we've been saying that
Hallelujah.
for years. Absolutely.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
There's no doubt that we as individuals should have uninsured motorist coverage. But the problem runs into if somebody doesn't have a car and they're utilizing an Uber for transportation.
That's it. That's the
these
hook
people
right
don't
there.
normally buy uninsured
Exactly
motorist coverage.
right. That is why, you know, Georgia has a law in the books, and Tennessee should have a law in the books. Tennessee has a law in the books that says Uber has to have $1 million policy if they're at fault.
Right.
They have nothing on the books regarding uninsured motorists.
Okay, so let's just say that you are somebody who lives on the North Shore and you don't need a car because you're work from home and you don't have a car.
You ride your skateboard, you ride your bikes, you
Right.
know, and if you got to go across town, you get an Uber or a Lyft.
Okay, it's just like the great question of can you go through the drive-through by walking or do you have to be in a car?
That's a good question.
Can you, I don't know the answer,
We'll try it
can
next
you
time, Julie.
have uninsured motorist coverage without a car?
Yes, you can buy insurance.
Okay.
You may have to.
That's
The
not
best thing to do is
real.
talk to your agent, but that's not a practical
That's not
thing.
real.
You
I
need-
mean, Uber should have uninsured motorists.
What if you take a taxi cab?
Well, I hope they have uninsured. Well, that's a risk right there.
some kind of the same
I don't know
thing.
whether or not-
Is it the same
I
thing?
don't know whether or not taxi cabs have to have uninsured motorists. If Uber doesn't, I don't think taxi cabs have to have
Is there
uninsured
a
motorists.
difference? This is
but
fun.
they do. I mean, because we have run into issues involving some cab services in town where uninsured motorists has been
They
in
do
play.
have uninsured
So the taxi cabs in Chattanooga that I've dealt with,
They have it.
uninsured motorists.
Because
yeah.
is there a difference too from a training perspective? You mentioned how it's a side hustle if you're an Uber or a Lyft driver. If you're a cab driver Is there like a vetting that you have to go through to be a cab driver compared to an Uber driver? The last time I was in a cab was in New York City, and I went like this.
Yes, exactly. That's the way I feel about
It's
that.
going to vary. I mean, for example, if you're in London, you have to study for decades to become a cab driver in London. Right. New York City, I mean, these guys were experienced drivers. I mean, these are really professionals for these guys.
That's a good question, though.
Good question.
Okay.
We'll answer that next time, okay?
Yes.
You can thank me later.
I will.
We're planning ahead. Okay, so does it matter how long a policy has been in effect before you have to make a claim?
No, I don't think that has any
So if you take the policy out today and you have a wrecked
tomorrow,
tonight,
now that's good. Now you can't have a wreck
There's no
today.
waiting period. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
There's no waiting period at all. You know, you can get a policy. You need to check out your policy anyway, because uninsured motorists is, like John Mark said, dirt cheap for good coverage, just in case you get hit by an uninsured driver, because the reason they're uninsured is because they're bad drivers. That's the problem. That's the cycle right there. They can't get insurance.
You should be purchasing uninsured motorist coverage whether you're taking Lyft or taking Uber. You should have it on your own policy anyway.
Yeah, you
so
should.
Relatively inexperienced. You're protecting yourself, but Uber and Lyft should also be protecting the consumer.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. We can contact our legislators about it.
Yes.
Sorry, but okay, let me ask you this one. What if I'm in an Uber and I have uninsured motorists?
Right.
But my particular Uber driver also happens to have uninsured motorists. Suppose that my Uber driver's in a wreck with another car. That car does not have insurance.
Right.
Whose insurance do you try to use first, the driver's or mine?
Both. And really, that's why you need a lawyer in these ride-sharing cases, because it's like an onion. You're peeling away coverages and coverages and coverages. And sometimes in an Uber accident, you do have 3 or 4 policies in play, and you have to massage the policies to make sure that the client gets the best outcome.
The question becomes, does the policy follow the driver or follow the vehicle? And it differs from Tennessee and Georgia.
Okay,
Right.
I thought about y'all yesterday. I think it was yesterday, I'm almost certain. I was on a road that you know how you always have like the same way you go to work and home every day, so you just kind of know it by memory. I was coming up doesn't matter, I was coming from Erlanger, and then getting on to Macaulay, right there by Park Ridge and all that area.
We are, right.
And I don't do that very often. So I hung my left onto Macaulay, and there is this green lane. I guess it's a bicycle lane.
It's a bike lane, right, yeah.
Do you run into problems with people when they're just not accustomed to where all those bicycle lanes are in town?
You really do. You really do.
I just turned and I thought, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have.
Luckily, there's no bicyclists in that bike lane.
Yeah.
That's a good thing right there.
But if there had been, he would have had the right of way, but they can come so fast.
I don't think you should be biking down Macaulay. Okay,
well, clearly you can.
I'm just saying, green lane or not, you should not be on a bicycle going down Macaulay.
Well, bicyclists are supposed to follow the rules of the road.
Right.
And I'm not saying they wouldn't have. It's just that green lane jolted me because I'm not used to it.
I know exactly where you are there. And it's kind of sudden.
They're to follow the rules of the road just like an automobile. They're supposed to be traveling the direction.
Do they have to have uninsured motorists?
Well, it probably would cover them.
I'm not kidding. Do you have to have?
It can boil down to whether you're covered as a pedestrian. It's not a motorized vehicle, so it's not going to fall in that category, but it could determine whether they're treated as pedestrian, not treated as pedestrian.
Wait, okay, I had 30 seconds.
But if you hit that bicyclist, I don't care about uninsured motorists because you have insurance.
Yeah, but if the bicyclist hit me,
right.
Are they required to carry some type of insurance to ride bikes on the road?
No. This is a law school exam here. I mean, this is like the bar exam 101 here. Do you know the answer to this, John Mark? He's the brains of the operation.
You need to start submitting your questions at least 48 hours ahead of time.
I've been looks of the operation. He's the brains of the operation.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to.
This is a law school.
You know what?
101 here.
Here's your.
Your umbrella policy may cover your negligence if you're operating a bicycle, but
exactly.
Okay, here's your silver lining as I show you their contact information. Is that the point is each case is its own.
Yes.
So they don't have to know all the answers sitting here on the green sofa. They're going to know the answers before your claim has to be dealt with, and that's what's important.
You preach, sister. Go Big R.
Amen.
Go Vols.